I'm gonna be craving boba so bad after this. Hello everyone! The adorable game on your screen right now is an early access title on Steam called Call of Boba, which has been marketed as a boba shop simulator with farming sim features. In the days since its release to early access, this game has garnered a mix of earned praise and deserved criticism, and now I'll be providing my own voice to the crowd. I'll preface this by saying that I didn't have much in terms of expectations for this game compared to a lot of other YouTubers in the cozy community, because I personally didn't play the demo. So while my opinion will likely seem a bit different compared to some other creators, I want you to keep in mind that I did not go into this with the same frame of reference as others, and I ask that you keep that in mind because I don't want anyone to think I'm purposely trying to invalidate or downplay other people's experiences, nor do I want to color your opinions of other creators' opinions on this topic. So, Call of Boba opens on a fairly familiar premise to those of us who have experience with this genre. Bobo has moved to the big city to chase his dreams, but finds himself burning out working the 9-to-5 grind of an office job. He ends up falling ill due to this burnout and wakes up in the hospital. As a result, Bobo loses his job and must move back to his hometown. While not exactly the same, it's rather reminiscent of a certain staple in the pixel cozy life simulator genre. Upon arriving at the train station in his hometown, Bobo receives a call from his mom and realizes that he can't bring himself to tell her what's happened. He's too ashamed and scared of disappointing her, so he doesn't. He tells her everything's fine, ends the call, and wanders up to the matcha market area. It's here, though, that he runs into, or is rather ran into, by his old childhood friend Stellar. He learns that Stellar has taken over his grandpa's old shop, Sheltered Lane Milk Tea, but as we come to learn, he's struggled, both with suddenly becoming the sole owner and employee of the shop, as well as with his grandfather's passing. Luckily, though, by running into Bobo, Stellar doesn't have to face these struggles alone anymore. He recruits Bobo to help out at the shop and invites him to live with him, which is equally lucky for Bobo, since he didn't have it in him to tell his mom what happened, and therefore kinda had no place to stay. From here, the game is divided up into 2 time slots. During the day, you'll help Stellar run the shop, work on story quests, farm, fish, and explore. And during the night, when you go to bed, you'll enter the dream world where you must help Bobo get through nightmares of his old office job in the city using a roguelike shooter mechanic in which Bobo is armed with a boba gun. Starting with the daytime mechanics, I'll talk about running the boba shop first. I've heard others say that they felt like the shop management simulation side of the game is a bit too simple, easy, and lacking in challenge, and I can agree with that to some extent. I don't hate it, but it does feel a little bit underwhelming at times. I have seen some people say they wished that the way you prepared drinks was the same as it is during the initial tutorial where you learn how boba milk tea is made, and how you seemingly learn other recipes for the rest of the time throughout the game. Now, respectfully, while I think that could have been fun, I found this way of preparing drinks to be a bit rough around the corners at times, and I think if I was trying to rush through customer orders using this particular method, I would have been a lot more prone to screwing up. I do, however, think I have a good suggestion as a compromise. I think something more like the preparation style seen in Papa's Freezeria and other games within that respective series could have been a really great and fun middle ground. What do you guys think? Anyways, like I said, I found the way you learn to prepare new drinks throughout the game for specific characters to be a bit rough, and I didn't really like the lack of clear guidelines for some of them. I don't know if maybe that was the point, like I was supposed to just wing it and hope for the best, but in games like this, I prefer clear guidelines as to what I'm supposed to be doing. And speaking of, I don't know if this is supposed to be a bug or a feature, but I learned really early on that this wayfinder on the ground around Bobo doesn't actually help point you in the direction of where you're supposed to go for quests, which I feel like it's supposed to. Isn't that how wayfinders usually work in games? Instead, during the daylight hours, it constantly points to the boba shop, and during the nighttime hours, it points to Stellar's house. Like I said, I don't know if this was intentional and it's just supposed to be giving us some idea of where we are on the map, or if this will eventually be patched to actually point towards quests, but for now I found it more frustrating than I did helpful. Moving on, let's take a look at one of the other big selling points of the game, farming. Now, I would like to remind everyone that I didn't play the demo, and apparently this is one of the points where my experience differed from those who did. I've learned that in the demo, you're outright given seeds to go plant and tend to, but in the early access release, this isn't the case. Instead, you have to buy the seeds from the general store in Matcha Market. Apparently, a lot of demo players didn't know this going into early access and simply thought they weren't able to farm at this point in time, and it would hopefully be fixed later. The only reason I figured it out was due to my past experience with farming sims that made me have the assumption you would have to buy seeds, and I also took some time in my first couple days to go explore the shops around the map, and that's when I found the seeds. While I like non-intrusive tutorials as much as the next person, the game definitely needs a little more clear instruction in certain aspects, especially in the areas where it differs from the demo version. Because of the lack of direction at times, the player base runs the risk of missing out on some really key features that make the game fun, which I think puts the developers in a risky spot in terms of people maybe asking for refunds on Steam, or losing longevity of playtime from players because they don't know where to go or what to do to get certain features to work. Before I move on to talking about the nighttime, I want to talk about the story, because the story here surprised me. Because the game is still in early access, I don't want to spoil anything, but this game does talk about grief. Like I said, Stellar has been struggling with losing his grandpa. If you're someone who's struggling with grief or loss, this one might be hard, but it is also definitely worth playing. If you're in a place where you can't handle these topics right now, though, you may need to skip over this one for the time being. So with that out of the way, let's talk about arguably one of the best features of the game, the dream sequences. I was fairly surprised by the dream sequences, and it sounds like a lot of other players were too. When you think boba shop and farm simulator, you don't tend to also think roguelike shooter. That said, it seems to mostly be a welcome surprise, with some folks even expressing it being their favorite part of the game. I know personally I had a ton of fun with these parts, with my only complaint being how repetitive the levels can start to feel after a while. I'm hoping the devs add some things to mix this portion of the game up and give it more variety, because otherwise it delivers really well and is a ton of fun. With Call of Boba being in early access and not technically at full release, I've tried to be a bit more forgiving of its shortcomings, and honestly it's not a bad game. The graphics are nice, the soundtrack is really pleasant to listen to, and the gameplay is, quirks aside, heading in the right direction. But I do absolutely see room for improvement in the coming updates before the team moves to full release. I really hope the developers take the feedback from the community to heart and are able to improve the player experience going forward so that Call of Boba can live up to its full potential. What about you guys? Have you played Call of Boba yet? If you did you play the demo or only the early access version? If you haven't, does this seem like the kind of thing you'd like to play in the future? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and until next time, stay cozy!